This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome in, folks, to another edition of Open Mic Night. I'm your host, Noah Toluki. And on today's episode, Michigan and Michigan State winning their season openers in football. We'll break down each of those matchups. And an interesting story about Michigan that I found on the Free Press just a couple days ago. We'll get into a little bit more of that details about Michigan football as well. Also, the big game on Sunday the 12th, the Lions taking on the 49ers. We'll preview that a little bit, but joining us later on in the program, we do have a special guest, Matt Dery, our good friend of the podcast. He will be joining us talking a little bit more about the Lions in depth. So this will be focused a little bit more on the college football side today, and we'll let Matt Dery and company kind of address the Lions a little bit later on. But hopefully everybody had a great weekend out there. I definitely did. It was awesome that football was back. You know, John Carroll football, they played Washington and Jefferson, so I was at that game. W&J, interesting enough, is where Roger Goodell went to college. And I know if you guys have listened to the podcast for a long time, you guys know, I'm a graduate assistant in the sports information department at John Carroll, and I have a lot of passion for the Blue Streaks and Division III athletics and all of the NFL alumni that have come through, like, you know, Josh McDaniels, Nick Caserio, Tom Telesco, Greg Roman. I mean, a bunch of John Carroll alums that are really, really big in the National Football League. So it was definitely, Washington Jefferson had a lot of tradition there as well. We unfortunately lost to them, but it was still a really good game and really good to just at least have football back. And I'm sure all of you guys at the Division I level were really, really happy that your Wolverines or your Spartans or whoever you cheer for were back officially. Notre Dame, if you're a big Notre Dame fan, they took it down to the wire against Florida State, surprisingly, and ended up coming out on top in overtime. That was a great game to watch. So a lot of good college football. A lot of the big time teams, they got it. It was close, especially Oklahoma against, I believe you have Tulane, 40-35. I mean, this is the number 2 team in the country, Spencer Rattler and all them, and a guy that, hey, some people think the Lions will take. I was looking at some of those mock drafts today, but it was well, that's another podcast for all mock drafts this early in the season. That's for another day. But Spencer Rattler, I mean, he struggled a little bit. There was some of the big time teams in college football really struggled. But I'll tell you this, Michigan and Michigan State, they did not seem to struggle much at all. We'll start with Michigan first because they won against Western Michigan 47-17. Okay. Michigan, they always, for the most part, they like to start off with, some of the mid-major competition and their home opener, get the 100,000 fans back at the big house and all that. So 47-17, a pretty good game offensively for the Wolverines. It's unfortunate that Ronnie Bell, one of their star receivers, looks like he'll be out for the entire season. He got injured there. But overall, a really good performance and a good start to the season for Michigan. But this is what it makes me think. How many times have we said, all right, good start to the season for Michigan, beating up on their mid-major opponent week 1? I feel like we've said that a lot. And I mentioned it before in the little teaser before. I ran across an article in the Free Press. This is from Sean Windsor. And it's labeled, Jim Harbaugh changed up Michigan football again this year. He could be onto something. Okay, so I said, okay, this looks like a really, really interesting article. So basically the article, and I'll just summarize it really brief. I want you guys to go check this out. Sean Windsor wrote this article in the Free Press. And he's talking about changing up the defense a little bit. We needed Jim Harbaugh with a quote after the win, and we needed some change-ups, and we needed to show some different looks. Talking about adjustments with his new defensive coordinator, Mike McDonald, especially, after the Broncos, Western scored the early touchdown in the game, just needed to disguise some coverages. So this is Don Brown is no longer the defensive coordinator here at Michigan. It's a new guy coming in, a lot of new young coaches as well on this Michigan staff. Basically the article goes on and it just talks about how Harbaugh seems to be making more adjustments and that it could turn out to play well for Michigan. And it just kind of makes me think like, okay, I know it's week 1. I know, they beat up on Western Michigan. Is Western going to beat Michigan? Probably not, but it's interesting because I thought for a second, how many times have we said that Harbaugh is not very good with making adjustments and is very stubborn and is just sticking to his style of offense, which is basically just running the football up the gut, the old school, not really about the spread offense like modern college football is today. So I just thought the article was kind of interesting because it talked about, it seems like he's a little bit more willing to make kind of some different adjustments. And it's talking about how there's a new energy with this Michigan program. How many times do we have to hear there's a new energy with Michigan? I mean, it's just kind of fun. I thought it was kind of funny just to see that, because it seems like every year they talk about there's this new energy and all that. Then, especially in the offseason, I talked about it on one of my other podcasts. When Jim Harbaugh was at Big Ten Media Day, he didn't seem inspired at all. He was just, it just did not seem like anything exciting with Michigan football. Now all of a sudden, there's this new energy that's coming through. It's gonna be interesting. And they talked more about how he's more hands-on this year with everyone, and especially with Cade McNamara, the quarterback from Nevada, who is he one of the latest quarterbacks for Michigan that just doesn't perform as well as as the hype says he is, or is he a guy that's actually gonna deliver Michigan to a 10+ win season and actually beat teams like Ohio State and Michigan State for once? So they're talking about Harbaugh being more hands-on this year, more, willing to adjust and change some things. So is the stubborn Harbaugh gone? Maybe. This article was just interesting in that aspect, because if we don't see a stubborn Harbaugh, if we see a guy that's willing to work with his assistants and willing to try new things, willing to make adjustments, willing to be a little more hands-on with his players, then I think that's one of the keys to Michigan having, being able to be actually competitive with its rivals. Because it just has not been like this. And this is year 7 for Harbaugh now. There's not a lot to cheer about with Michigan football, but if this comes to fruition, if he keeps, getting more hands-on, like I said, and all the energy, then I think maybe we could see something with Michigan. But it may take a while, but at least it's the start of something. Am I going to crown them Big Ten champions after this win against Western Michigan? No, not at all. And frankly, even if they beat Washington on Saturday, I'm not going to crown them at anything. I want to see how they start doing in Big Ten games. Let's see how Michigan starts playing against Michigan State, Ohio State, Penn State. How about they start beating some of those teams first before we start saying, hey, this team's going to be really good. So Washington should be an interesting test as well. Always one of the better teams in the Pac-12. 8 p.m. on ABC this weekend, so a primetime game, a maze out, they call it at the Big House. And, a lot of, I'm sure the whole stadium will just be full of yellow, and it'll be a good sight to see, that's for sure. By the way, speaking of Michigan really fast, how about Dan Dierdorf and Jim Brandstatter, the broadcasters for University of Michigan football? How about them saying that they were going to retire together? Kind of the last ride. They're going to retire together and, call it a year after this year. Kind of sad, because they're both. I like Jim Brandstatter, especially on Lions calls, and there was that whole fiasco with him getting let go from WJR and all that, and he just decided to focus on Michigan football. Then Dan Dierdorf, the former NFL commentator, Pro Football Hall of Famer, both Michigan grads, both played for Bo in the 70s together and all that. So an era coming to a close, I guess. So we'll have to see who will be the play-by-play voice of Michigan football, because that's a big-time job for sure. And, Rick Finati, if you go back to one of the podcasts I did last year, we actually interviewed Rick Finati, who's the head coach here at John Carroll University for football. But he worked for Harbaugh for 2 years. So his first 2 years in Ann Arbor, 2015 and 16, he was with Harbaugh and Don Brown and all those guys. And Coach Finati has told me stories of sitting next to Jim Brandstatter and Dan Dierdorf on airplane rides, to games, and just the stories that those guys had. He always made sure to sit by them at games, and I always just, some of the stories that he's told me, it's just really, really interesting, and a lot of good, tradition at Michigan, but obviously just the last 10, 15 years, not much to cheer for, especially under Harbaugh. So hopefully one day Michigan will get it together. Will this be a start of the stubbornless Harbaugh? We'll have to see. but a very interesting article from Sean Windsor, that's for sure. All right, I want to switch gears to Michigan State. And Michigan State, how about that? A nice season opening win against Northwestern. Now, 38-21 was the final score. It's Northwestern, I understand. Northwestern seems to be up and down. One year, they're in the Big Ten championship. Another year, they're going 4-7 or 4-8 or whatever. But I will say, and I mentioned it last podcast, I really consider this year one for Mel Tucker. Last season was a little bit of a fluke, obviously, with not as many games played, and with Mel Tucker being hired a little bit later than most coaches are. I believe he was hired in February. Most coaches are hired in December. So a little bit later of a start. Didn't get a real spring ball much. So I really think that this is year one. This is a great opening win for the season for the Spartans. Going to Northwestern and winning that football game at Ryan Field. Shout out to my sister, by the way, who's a student at Loyola, not too far from Northwestern, who actually was at that game. I did not. She gave me a call. She's like, "Hey, I'm at the game." I'm like, "Oh wow, I had no idea." And my friend, one of my good friends, Kyle Kelly, he is also going to be a student at Medill, which is the premier journalism school in the country, a graduate student there at Northwestern. So a couple of Northwestern ties, I guess, I had this weekend. But anyways, so pretty efficient day overall. The big story headline of the day was Kenneth Walker III rushing 23 times for 264 yards and 4 touchdowns, averaging 11.5 yards a carry. So this guy was averaging a first down every time he touched the ball. Pretty incredible there. And I was not expecting a rushing performance like that. This is one of the best single-game rushing performances in Michigan State history. And it was right off the bat. This is a guy who transferred in from Wake Forest, and it looks like he's going to be the bell cow running back for the Spartans this year. No Elijah Collins. He didn't get a single carry. This is a guy 2 years ago that was the Big Ten, the leading Big Ten rusher for guys that were returning to the 2020 teams. But it's obvious that Mel Tucker is getting his guys in there. And we mentioned it on the last podcast, a lot of transfers, and he's getting his own guys in for sure. So Peyton Thorne, the starting quarterback for Michigan State, 15 of 25 for 185 yards and a touchdown, no turnovers. So that's a good sign to see there as well. They also have some speed on the outside. Jordan Simmons caught the one receiving touchdown. Jalen Reed, Trey Mosley, Connor Hayward, Jalen Naylor, another speedster. So some short, efficient passes, but overall just a great running performance as well. Really stopping the Northwestern attack and really coming through later in the game for sure. So another promising start for Michigan State. Hopefully Mel Tucker can just start establishing his culture and really bring in some pride back to East Lansing, because it has not been the same in East Lansing since Mark D'Antonio and all the great assistants that he had in those years 2013, 14, 15 when they were going to the Big Ten championship, beating Ohio State, going to the college football playoff, winning the Rose Bowl. It just has not been the same since a lot of those assistants left for other jobs, like Narduzzi leaving for Pitt, amongst some other guys. So it's a good start for Michigan State. They play Youngstown State this weekend on the 11th at 12 noon on Big Ten Network. So that'll be another game. They should win that one. However, I do want to mention the Penguins. I believe Mark D'Antonio used to coach there. I believe he did it back in the 90s. Because these games are all scheduled out before, so I'm sure Mark D'Antonio had scheduled this game when he was head coach. But a little bit about Youngstown State. So John Carroll, I talk about the pipeline and everything. We have a little bit of a Youngstown State pipeline going on right now. So Youngstown State's defensive coordinator, Joe Schaefer, an excellent coach. He coached at John Carroll for 2 years, so I got to work with him when I was on the film staff. Also, one of their special teams coordinator, Evan Harvey, he was our linebackers coach for a season when I was there. And one of their quality control guys, Chad Stallnacker, is a guy who played for us just a couple years ago at John Carroll and now is working with the defense over there. So 3 John Carroll people, or that used to be on the staff at least at JCU, are on Youngstown State. So deep down, I want them to play well for sure and show Michigan State that the FCS can be competitive. But however, Michigan State, from a culture standpoint with Mel Tucker, it'll be good to get to 2-0. That's for sure. All right, so enough with some college football. I want to get in just a little bit with the Lions first before we get to Matt Derry later on in the program. But the Lions, first game against the 49ers this weekend, and it should be exciting. Dan Campbell really called for a hyped crowd and a really excited crowd at Ford Field on Sunday. Should be really, really fun. And unfortunately, I will not be there. I really wish I was going, but I'll definitely be there in spirit watching the game on TV. It'll be a lot of fun for sure. This is a tough 49ers team. A team that is loaded with pass rushers and just guys that are scary off the line. Armstead, Bosa, among some other guys. And it'll be really interesting to see how the Lions' offensive line handles that, because the Lions' O-line is the strength of the team. I think the key to winning this game, if the Lions have any chance to win this game, would be up front. Whatever line plays better, I think they're going to win the game. If they can keep Jared Goff, clean in the pocket, that's always a plus. And I think really they can win this game by keeping him clean. They have to. Now, are we expecting much from the Lions this season? No, I'm not. Look, I'm a diehard Lions fan, but I'm being honest about this team. I'm not expecting a whole lot of wins. Now, would it be nice to beat the 49ers? Of course it would. I just want to see improvement. If the Lions lose this game, but I see some guys out there fighting, I see some guys out there that are really making a name for themselves, then that's a positive for me, because you got to be in it for the long haul with this group of guys, with Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes and company. You can't just say, "Oh, if we don't win enough games this year, they should be fired." No, you can't think like that. So it's going to be a big game on Sunday. I'm glad the league was able to give the Lions a home game for week 1 instead of having to go on the road. So playing in front of the fans for the first game should be a lot of fun. All right, so we're going to get to Matt Derry right now, and a good friend of the podcast as always. He's a great interview. So here is our interview with Matt Derry. And joining us here on the Open Mic Night podcast is a very good friend of the podcast, Matt Dery, host of the Locked On Lions podcast, my former teacher at the University of Detroit Jesuit High School as well. Matt, thanks for joining us again. Really good to see you.
Great to see you, Noah. Always a pleasure, my friend, and I hope all is well with you.
Oh, absolutely it is. And before we start talking about Lions, I see you're calling some high school football now and all that. How's all that been going?
Oh, I dabble in just about everything. I did the opener for Orchard Lake St. Mary's and Oak Park on the prep, which my good friend Chad Bush has sort of started, and then Woodward Sports is backed. So they're doing a high school football game of the week. They actually have St. Mary's and Harper Woods this Friday night. I'm not doing that one, but I might do the Macomb Dakota game against Chippewa Valley the next week, and then got a few other things in the hopper, but still doing Lions every day, talking on the podcast, and exciting that we're going to get started on Sunday. Can you believe this?
It's unbelievable. I know, Dan Campbell talked about it earlier today about, he expects a rowdy crowd at that game on Sunday. And so, how exciting is it for, Lions fans to be back? Because obviously there was no fans last year at games, and now all of a sudden it's going to be a really, really nice crowd, hopefully on the regular season opener.
Yeah, look, Lion fans are great, and they are dedicated, and to go back to the stadium where, of course, they weren't allowed to be at last year, and it's very understandable with the times that we've lived in, but to get an opportunity to get back at it this weekend, and it's exciting. The problem is, as you know, and as you follow the team just like I do and everybody else, it's going to be a very rough year. Dan Campbell's awesome. Brad Holmes has been good. Those guys are dedicated to turning this thing around. They've made some nice moves, but it's going to be a little while before fans, I think, can really taste success with the team. They're playing a very, very good team right out of the chute here in San Francisco. It's not going to be an easy game, but at least they're getting, like you said, back in the stadium, new quarterback, a new look. We'll see where this thing goes.
I want to ask you about the receivers. And I know on your podcast you've talked about it, and the receivers, not too good of a performance in the preseason overall, but just a lot of guys who are just raw, and a lot of new faces Some questionable pickups even with Trinity Benson. They traded for him with the Denver Broncos. Then Kadero Hodge, they just picked him up from the Browns. I mean, how confident are you in this receiving group? And do you think is this a group that could get better and better throughout the year, or just be inconsistent the whole year?
Yeah, I don't know. I wish I had an answer for you. I like the pickups of Trinity Benson and Kadero Hodge, but it's not like they picked up Jerry Rice and Calvin Johnson here. It's going to take some time. Jared Goff has really played very sparingly in preseason. He doesn't have any chemistry with any of these guys. I know they practice every day, and I know he worked very much exclusively in the offseason away from Allen Park with TJ Hawkinson, and I think that's going to be his guy. But if you're the opposing team, the history that the Lions have in running the football. It's not a good one. And you see these receivers, and you're like, we're just going to double number 88 anytime he's on the field and going out on a pass pattern. So if they take Hawkinson away, who's going to step up and make plays? I don't have the answer to that. I like Quintez Cephas. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown will be a nice, fourth-round draftee and a guy in the slot. But you've got to show defenses that you can have guys on the outside making plays, and the Lions just don't have it. They basically flushed $2 million down the toilet with Rashad Perriman, who's now gone. This is definitely the weakest part of their team. But to answer your question, yeah, Benson and Hodge can come in and make a few plays. It's better than the alternative and what they started with. But only this thing can it can only go up, because right now it's pretty low in terms of having to replace Marvin Jones, Kenny Galladay, Danny Amendola, Jamal Agnew. That's difficult, and they have not done that successfully yet.
I know you've talked a lot about the greatness of the offensive line this year, how it could be probably the strongest unit on the team. However, the starting right tackle, Penei Sewell, according to your friends at PFF, not doing too hot, especially in the preseason, didn't grade out too well. Are you concerned at all, or is this a shaking off the rust, he didn't play in 2020 kind of thing?
I would say both. I'm a little bit concerned because he's a top 10 pick, and he really did struggle in the preseason. He's playing on the right side. He's used to playing on the left side. I think he's going to be fine. We're going to find out right away, because when they line up Bosa and they line up Armstead against him, we're going to find out. If he gets overmatched, and these are good football players, all right, but if he gets overmatched in the first couple of weeks going against the Smith brothers in week 2, I mentioned Armstead, I mentioned Nick Bosa, then I think you'll be concerned. But he's a rookie. But they don't have anybody else. It's not like you can say, well, he had a poor preseason, Noah, so let's let him ease his way in. No, he's going to play. Jeffrey Okudah is going to play. Lee McNeil is going to play. These first and second year guys, throw them out there. Let's see what they have. You might not win a lot of games, but at least you're going to find out, can we develop these players? Are they going to work out and eventually get better as the season goes? That's what we're looking at here, is trying to establish a bit of a culture and then some improvement moving forward. That's all you can ask for.
Talking to Matt Dery, host of the Locked On Lions podcast and a good friend of our podcast here. You talked about some of those defensive guys, Jeff Okudah, Lee McNeil, a lot of the younger guys that will play. Last season, the defense with Matt Patricia was historically bad. I mean, even worse than the 08 Lions, the 0-16 Lions. So do you think we'll see an improvement with this defense at all, or will it take some time, or throughout the season will it just get better and better, or what is your outlook on that, I guess?
Well, I really like the defensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn. I love Aubrey Pleasant, the defensive backs coach, and I think that we will see improvement. Like you said, a historically bad defense a year ago, and now they've rid themselves of some of the guys that I thought really could not play. Jared Davis is gone. Jelani Tavai is gone. Mike Ford, to an extent, he was a bit cornerback, but he's out. They bring back a lot of the defensive line. Some guys I'm not sold on. Some I think are going to be okay. I need to see Trey Flowers earn that $18 million a year, because he has shown that he can play the game a little bit. But historically bad, no. They will be better. I still question where they are at linebacker. I'm concerned about the safeties. But with scheme and with guys fighting for jobs and spots, and like we said, Okudah being elevated from a rookie that struggled to a second-year guy with who actually went through a training camp this year and didn't have to do everything virtually, I think they will be improved, yes.
From a coaching staff perspective, and we haven't talked to you in a while about this, but a lot of the coaches on this staff are former players. I just want to know, in terms of being a young team and guys with not a whole lot of NFL experience, how much do you think having guys that have done it before, successful NFL players, as coaches, how much do you think that will help their development throughout the season?
I mean, we're going to find out. I don't know. I mean, just because you have a bunch of former players doesn't mean that all of a sudden they can coach. They are highly regarded, though. Aaron Glenn is going to be a head coach in this league. Deuce Staley is going to be a head coach in this league. But I don't know if Mark Brunell is going to make Jared Goff any better. Aubrey Pleasant, Antoine Randall, I don't know. I mean, I think it's cool. I've seen NBA staffs that have been put together with all former players, and people go, oh, all these former players. I remember Mo Cheeks was the coach for the Pistons. It lasted like 1 year, and his entire staff was former players, including Rasheed Wallace, and it was an unmitigated disaster. But everybody said, well, these guys are all former players. They can relate to the guys. That's great. But can they X and O? Can they rally a locker room on a road trip where they're 0-3 with 2 more to go? That's the true test. Just because they play the game, I think it's important. I think guys listen to former players when they're the coaches, but can they prepare their team? Dan Campbell said yesterday his biggest fear, he was telling Stoney and Jansen on the ticket, his biggest fear is that he's not going to have his team prepared. He doesn't know. He was an interim coach for 12 games in Miami years ago, never got a sniff since. I think he's been fine so far, and he seems like a really good guy, and the players love him. But can he, in a tight game, Noah, when, let's say they're playing the Bengals and they're already 0-4, 0-5, they're desperate for a win. They've got the football at their own 20 and a couple of timeouts, a minute and a half to go. Can Campbell maneuver through the timeouts, the stoppages in play, a red challenge flag? Can he do it? And can he help them win? And that's what we're going to find out this year. But a lot of these questions are kind of going unanswered right now. And I'm not going to put a lot of stock into the preseason. That's ridiculous.
One of the position groups that in the NFL where you win, you win a lot of games with is the running backs. And, we know it's an old bit, as you would say here in Detroit, just the Lions don't have a run game. They haven't had it since Barry Sanders. These guys now, DeAndre Swift, the addition of Jamal Williams from the Packers, Jamar Jefferson, a couple of these other rookies. Do you see an improved run game this year, especially with the offensive line, as we mentioned earlier, the strongest unit on the team? You see the Lions trying to establish that run game to hopefully, just get better and better throughout the year?
Here's the thing. Part of me wants to say yes. I know that I'm totally on the fence on all these answers, but listen, they're going to try to run. They're going to run first because they don't have a wide receiver that they're confident in. And their quarterback is a step down from the past. Now, I'm not going to sit here and blast Matthew Stafford or go into that or even say he's a Super Bowl winning quarterback yet. But the bottom line is, if you asked all these NFL experts, you've asked coaches who they'd rather have, Matthew Stafford or Jared Goff, 90 of them out of 100 are going to say they'd rather have Stafford. So that puts the ground game in the spotlight. They have a coach that wants to run. They have an offensive coordinator that wants to run. Like you said, Swift, Williams, Jefferson, it's probably the best running back room they've had in a while. The offensive line's pretty good. I think they're better pass blockers than run blockers, but we're going to find out this year because I think they've worked on it. So, yes, I think it'll get better. My concern is that teams are going to say, okay, Goff isn't a very good thrower way down the field. He's not a deep ball thrower. And they don't have receivers that we're worried about. So we're going to push 8-9 guys up in the box and stop the run and make them throw. And if that's the case, and you got 5 hats, 6 hats if you kind of tight end, trying to block 8 guys, that'll be difficult to do.
Last question for you, Matt, here. So the Niners, week 1 on Sunday, should be a really, really big game at Ford Field. If the Lions have any shot of winning this game, what do the Lions need to do? Because there's some scary pass rushers on this team for the Niners. And then We don't know if Jimmy Garoppolo or we'll see Trey Lance at all, at quarterback for them. And they have a couple playmakers on offense as well. So if the Lions are trying to win this game, if any chance of winning, what do they need to do to establish that, in week one?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think that number one, they've got to keep Jared Goff upright. Ford, Armstead, Bosa. I mean, the Niners are loaded with guys that can get to the quarterback. If Goff's going to be under duress all day, they're not going to win. They're already 8-point underdogs going into the game. Also, George Kittle is a monster, and the Lions over the last few years have not shown a propensity to stop the tight end. Now, they've got different linebackers this year. Anzalone is new. Got a couple of new guys out there. They say that Harris and Walker have improved at the safety spot. But if Kittle's open all day, then the offense can't get on the field to score points. And so it's going to be a long day at the office. So stopping the tight end, I think, will be key as well. I'm worried about the kicking game. Austin Seibert, who knows? The Niners have Robbie Gould on the other side. That guy's usually money. So I'm worried about that a little bit. But keeping Goff protected and giving him time to throw will be, pretty big this weekend, because I think the Niners are going to send the house. I think the defensive line coach for San Francisco, Chris Kasurik, I'm not going to say he's out for blood, but he would like nothing more than to go into Detroit, a place he used to work, and shove it down the Lions' throats. So it's a tough matchup to start the season.
That's one more thing, actually. That actually is interesting what you mentioned, the kicking game. And, I know we texted about it back and forth when it happened. The Lions released both kickers, Zane Gonzalez and Randy Bullock, and then they don't even have a guy on their initial 53-man roster at the kicking position. And then they go out and sign Seibert. I mean, what's the deal with this? I know you've been very adamant on the podcast. They never should have gotten rid of Matt Prater. I mean, what's going on here with the kicking game?
Well, look, Matt Prater, from what I was told, would have liked to have stayed. He liked it here. His career resurrected here. His life turned around here. His wife is from Arizona, so that was a consideration. And they offered him initially, the Cardinals did, the same money as the Lions, but the Lions only offered 1 year, from what I was told, and the Cardinals offered 2. Lions then moved some contracts around, freed up some money, went back to Prater. By that time, he had already committed to Arizona. So when you lose a guy that is just unbelievable from deep, Stafford would get him to the 30, 47, 48-yard field goal, and Prater nailed him. Last year was not his best year, but to then go from, like you mentioned, Matt Prater to, all right, we'll sign Randy Bullock away from the Bengals. Bullock lost his job to Austin Seibert at the end of last year. Seibert was with the Bengals. He gets cut, and the Lions pick up the guy that beat out the guy that they signed in the offseason. Throw in Zane Gonzalez and Matthew Wright, who both couldn't cut the mustard either, and you're rotating 4 guys around, but for 5, 6, 7 years, you had Prater here who you knew we could pencil in. So from that standpoint, I think Brad Holmes has done a pretty good job with roster construction, is doing the best he can. But on the kicking side, I'm not quite sure they even are sure where they're going with this. And that's not good because if they're going to be playing if they're going to win some games, it's going to be close. And they're going to need a guy to bang a couple of field goals through.
You can follow Matt on Twitter at Dery Speaks, Dery Speaks. Also check out his podcast, the Locked On Lions podcast. You can find that on whatever podcast platform you want. It's an awesome, awesome listen, and I would definitely recommend it for you guys out there if you guys have never listened to it. But Matt, thanks again for joining us. Really appreciate your Lions insight as always, and hopefully on Brush Street, on Brush Avenue this weekend, they'll get the win.
No, I know you wish you could be there on Sunday. Knowing you as I do, you will be there in spirit. And I know Sunday you'll have your Lions gear on down there in University Heights. But thanks as always for having me on, buddy, and continued success.
I want to thank Matt Dery for joining us again on the podcast. He's always great. Had him on a couple times during the show's history here. So he's a great Lions insight. And really, guys, seriously, his podcast is awesome. Locked On Lions, a daily podcast. He's got a lot of great guests on there as well, and a lot of really, really good Lions coverage for sure. We're always texting back and forth about about this guy, that guy on the Lions, what move they were making, all that kind of stuff. So we're in good sync, and if you're a diehard Lions fan, that's definitely the podcast for you. Make sure to check out all the other great content here, the other podcasts on the network as well. Doc and Jock's always great. The wrestling podcast is always fun to listen to. The Fan Report talking some Pistons as well as some Lions this week, and of course the Michigan podcast with Steve Dace and his good friend Mark Rogers as well. So there's just a lot of great podcasts, and make sure to check out John Macaroon's great work that he does with Sports Illustrated as well. Hopefully the Lions win for Sunday, but we'll break that down for you next week for sure. Thanks again, folks, for tuning in, and make sure to join in next week only on Open Mic Night.